Beautiful and deadly, the ocean. I discovered this on my 21st birthday while serving in the Navy. The USS Sprague was a guided missile frigate. She was tiny, and these ships are the fleet's smallest line ships at 445 feet. She was a good ship, and our CO was determined to prove it. I found myself going full speed into a hurricane off Newfoundland and Nova Scotia. In late October 1988, meteorological reports said a tropical storm, Keith, had not dissipated as predicted and had gone farther north than any previous storm that season. Late November was too late to withstand a North Atlantic hurricane. I thought about how the Canadian Navy was meant to welcome us to this NATO multi-fleet event. I couldn't establish any of these things since I was on a freezing ship's bridge in a sleet storm with 30 miles per hour gusts and huge waves. 7 layers of clothes were necessary. After studying the latest weather warnings, the skipper chose to stay at sea since a ship import during a storm is pounded about until either the ship or the pier breaks. Canada's bad weather leads to strong piers. We risked the storm. Soon we were in undulating mode, which tests sea legs and stomachs. Walking from my berthing place to my watch station. Earlier in the evening, I didn't notice that my footfalls sometimes fell on the deck and sometimes on the bulkheads. I ignored the ship's noises. Overall, the generator hum or sonar ping. I focused on odors, which may reveal a lot. The galley will serve blueberry pie tomorrow. The scent of the fuel oil samples from the lab told me our tanks were low after a storm. Hot coffee from the mess decks entered my nose as I refilled my cup, and paint, perspiration, and smokes rounded out my card-playing shipmates' contribution to this nautical shattered. I'll climb the ship's warm, friendly, almost uterine inner staircases and passages to the bridge. The sea was wonderful. Wave crest to trough was 40 feet. I've never seen 40-foot waves, and I wish I'd experienced them on a more robust ship than the tin cans I called home. I'd only been in the Navy for a year, but I knew the North Atlantic floor was strewn with rotten and rusty monuments to humanity. As I consider this, straining through salt-frozen eyes at the flaming and screaming wave tops, the water looks and sounds like a huge grinder, ready to pulverize me, the ship, and everything. Directly ahead of the ship, lightning hit a wave. This wave was 50 feet taller than our main deck. This wave was a killer. Time stood still, framed in that lightning bolt, which seemed to claw its way down into the sea, forking and branching and turning that monstrous wave into a giant mountain of emerald and jade with its glowing, so durations and an instant its horrible beauty was gone forever, burned into my memory, but lost to my retinas and replaced with blindness. Lightning smelled like ozone. Sobbed. Rogue wave in my calm. Bridge personnel also saw it. Who could miss a gigantic, green, falling mountain? Blinded? My boots felt like a beach when an oncoming wave sweeps water from beneath your sand-covered feet. The deck dropped out from beneath the sea and my feet as millions of tons of water raced to feed the giant. As the ship smashed into the wave, it broke over me 3 stories above the main deck. Without my safety strap, I would have been lost when almost 100 feet of the superstructure speared into the wave, and as the green water burst over the windbreak, it was like colliding with a wall. The impact reverberated. The ship nearly stalled, and I thought she'd discovered a ring. Later, the bridge crew informed me the windows were temporarily flooded and they had to look up to see the surface. The ship started to moan and tremble as she shouldered higher, spilling tons of water. All aboard survived. I recognized which wave caused the inch-wide breaches in the superstructure. I learned that the ocean's beauty, attraction, and ferocity are more rare than dangerous. Mid-2000s, I worked aboard a South Pacific research vessel. Since the ship's crew was contracted, I worked closely with them. They take 10 hours to build. If I recall properly, we were just about to initiate a turn and proceed in the opposite way. Think about mowing the grass and then we got news that one of the twins, Kate, is having a seizure. We did have a doctor on board, but clearly this is a really severe issue. The team gathered to assist, and Kit told us that Kate had experienced seizures previously, possibly due to relationship troubles back home. They were originally from a nation that believes seizures are a spiritual experience, not a medical ailment. So Kate is getting these weird seizures that are lasting like 30+ minutes. We're down in the lower berths and Kit is assisting the doc and one of the mates who had a ton of practical first responder experience by the way, and by this time we've started recovering the vehicle, 10+ hours remember, and planning to head to the closest island, a small atoll, which is just days southwest, so that Kate can be medevaced, and I don't mean a chopper, just whatever plane we can get. The US Coast Guard says we're too far from land. They are the Coast Guard after all. We divided them up so we could manage them and brought one twin upstairs. We created watch areas to prevent self-harm. They continue seizing throughout vehicle rescue and much of the trip. They were separated by 2 floors on a 170-foot ship, yet would go in and out of consciousness at the same time. Surreal? We eventually obtained the tiny ports and transported them to a hospital, which the doctor judged unsuitable and worse on the ship. One of the twins' engines failed mid-air, forcing a chaotic landing. Doctors in the US can't detect anything wrong with them. I was a military sailor who often went away for weeks. One of my tasks was to be a lookout and notify boats, aircraft, and other objects to the ship. My lookout rotation included day and night watch, sometimes both, and I was most scared at night, particularly at the rear of the ship. Anyone who hasn't been out at sea at night should know there are more lights than in the city. Navy ships have few nighttime lights. So at 1 AM when there's no moonlight, it seems extremely foreign. You're on another world. I once saw beautiful green water flowing slowly. I was confused. Maybe it's Oso or something else, I thought. I was informed it was plankton, but it appeared creepy to someone unfamiliar with its light. Another time, I and another man were standing watch at 2 AM and see what the night sky holds. Meteors would flash across the sky, but I also saw slow-moving luminous lights. Maybe the satellite. Maybe. I peered into the sky for 20 minutes and saw 15 slow-moving lights millions of kilometers distant. Regardless, those were the few times I observed how wide space is and how much is yet unknown. Have you gone deep-sea diving? We were floating in nothingness, removing nets and doing repairs. Divers need a light source. Personal spotlights connected to the helmet and bigger flashlights to illuminate the area so we can see what we are working on, etc. 200 to 300 meters distant. Ever watched a jet land with little barriers? You should see 200 meters. You may not see license plate numbers 700 meters away, but you may still see a vehicle, bus, or person. We had a strong flashlight and clean salt water. We were nowhere near the bottom when we spotted the most gorgeous and frightening beast. Tentacles still give me nightmares, flashlight grows with distance. We saw a lot of the squid's blood-red body during my year in the Norwegian Coast Guard. As you may guess, the water is chilly up there, approximately 1 C. If you go overboard, you're probably dead within minutes. One day I had to complete the daily man overboard boat routine inspection since these boats are quick. They're outside the ship. So if you fall out of it, you fall into the sea. Since it was late winter and were enormous chunks of ice in the water, the ship's captain didn't worry about striking them. The boat shook well, However, when my boat hit an iceberg, I was flung overboard and just managed to grasp a rope. Remembering how close I came to freezing to death still terrifies me. I worked aboard the USS Dixon, a submarine tender, in the late 1990s. Submarine repairs at sea were unsafe and dumb. Ship spent 11 months riveted to pier. Once a year, the ship had to be at sea for at least 30 days to be deemed sea duty. Sea duty offered better pay and promotions. So we got to live and play in sunny San Diego most of the year and then go to Fleet Week in San Francisco or Sea Fair in Seattle. The summer before I joined, the ship went to Alaska and did charity work in a coastal town. On the way back from this stop, they headed fairly far out to sea rather than hugging the coast as usual. The ship was thrown by a storm. Nice. Here's the ship's layout. The ship could repair nuclear reactors. Big machine shop. The ship's machine shop featured massive doors that were bolted shut once a year. They would check the door's functionality, grease and re-bolt the seals. Sometimes they opened the doors to bring in heavy objects, but when at sea the machine shop was fully equipped with every form of machine tool and supplies kept away in cages. The ship's tub rocked and rolled throughout the storm. People were falling because of the storm. People were seasick, so they made sandwiches and Kool-Aid in the kitchen. As the storm became worse, the chief engineer phoned the captain to notify him the ship was ready to sink. The gushing fuel oil smothered the burners. This meant the ship would be at the mercy of the water with no means to stare into the waves, and they did. The ship lost all forward momentum after switching to emergency power, a 10-cylinder Caterpillar diesel generator. The ship was rocking beyond what its builders planned because of the waves. A boat's main deck crane fell off. Waves slamming the ship revealed this later. If the passengers were unpleasant, the walls would alternate as the floor. Few brave people could function. The corpsman ran out of anti-nausea medications and used morphine. I started the Korean War. While I versus they, then everyone heard an unsettling noise like something slamming into the ship. Damage control discovered a horrible nightmare in the machine shop. The enormous doors started leaking, and water sloshed back and forth in the vast room as the ship rocked. The enormous area's waves were sometimes several feet high. Large metal billets smashed through the supply cages and were bashing into the ship like a battering ram. Some machine tools with inbuilt transformers leaked insulating oil. Oil mixed freely with salt water. This made the situation even more dangerous for the damage control team, but they had to act because the ship was in mortal danger. The brave men, women, and 1,600 sailors aboard said they lassoed the billets, held them in place between rolls, and welded them to the metal deck and uprights wherever they could. Some had to crawl below the machine shop to put out welding flames, while others sought to lock the ship's huge doors. They completed the risky mission without losing any lives. The ship was safe until the lights went out, and the emergency generator's diesel fuel was tainted by water. The 10-cylinder engine was destroyed. As the storm raged for hours, the ship was genuinely adrift until the main engines were relit. No one was killed, but several were severely injured. The ship limps to port. Then, the ship remained near to the shore for the remainder of its existence, but it's since been used as a target and destroyed, presumably with torpedoes carried aboard a 41-foot sailboat in the middle of the Chesapeake Bay by 7 men on a shakedown/test trip in the mid-1980s. Unreliable weather forecasting. We're stuck in a tropical storm with 50 miles per hour gusts, almost a hurricane. Since the storm was approaching, We barely rigged storm huzzahs and storm sails. We'd have perished in the storm. For 15 minutes, I expected to die. No visibility, maelstrom, yet we survived. 3 p.m. Despite the clouds, the ambient light allowed for a 2-mile view in either direction. If you know the sea, you know that storms, especially near landmasses, dredge the sea bottom. We're working lines, verifying damage, etc., while the bay is rough and foaming. Old sailors said, the sea's confused. Off the starboard side, something swims up, glances at us, and then submerges. It was humanoid and slender. It had human arms and a human head, but snake-like scales. It blanked us. Odd. Heavy-lidded eyes, submerged. Maybe you should know a few things about myself. None of the above. My senses were heightened, not dulled, by my joy at being alive. I had 6 years of experience on ships and fishing boats and had seen squid, octopi, flying fish, sharks, skates, etc. Everywhere. I wouldn't call seaweed a sea monster. I decided instinctively to keep quiet. I dunno. Believe me, I witnessed a weird monster. These guys were mechanics, engineers, and professionals. Why develop a flake reputation? As I stood in my wet life vest connected to a steel lifeline, qualifications were frowned upon. I'm alive. A US Navy captain with almost 30 years of expertise claimed, I just saw a brown object rise out on the surface. It had a lizard-like face. It winked at us, then submerged. So did I. I stated nobody else saw it. Later that day, we sailed back to the dock and never discussed it.